What's up? Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, hello, my name's Ash, I'm a music producer, and today we're going to be talking about synthpop. I have done a synthpop video before, but I'm really specifically talking about this kind of new wave of synthpop that we've seen in the last maybe year or so. Artists like Ava Max, Tove, the new Ellie Goulding album, which is phenomenal by the way, all incorporating this super kind of like vintage 80s feel, but with this ultra modern vocal production, really tight, big, snappy, in-your-face drums. So I wanted to show you my process for how I would go about creating a track like that. So I've just pulled up the session here, and this is what we're going to be going over today. Alright, cool. So I think we should start with the intro first. The intro is literally just a couple of things. What I wanted to do with this is that I wanted to kind of set the scene for the rest of the track, right? I wanted this to have the key elements of the song so that everything feels super familiar as the track progresses. So firstly, we have this little riff that I wrote, and this is coming from the Juno 106 from Arturia. Love this. It was basically the default patch that opened up, and it sounds like this. As you can hear, that's got so much character and it's so like vibey and ambient, but it's still got a lot of impact and punch, which was really important to me. I definitely messed around with the attack a little bit just to kind of get that like almost like brass effect. It kind of just goes like wow. And then on that, I've got an EQ, which is just taking out the lows because I didn't need that because I was going to layer a bass under it. Doing a little bit of EQ within the standard EQ within Cubase. And then I've got RC20 as well, which is just doing a little bit of distortion and a little bit of wobble. It's kind of just giving a little bit more movement to it. Underneath that, I have this sidechain pad here. What that's doing is it's filling in the gaps, it's adding ambience and space, but it's also adding that pumping effect, which is just going to kind of keep it feeling a little dancey. I wanted to kind of make sure that the intro was breathing as much as possible because the verses are so punchy, those drums are so like boom, ka, that I kind of wanted everything to kind of just feel like it was doing its little like a little shimmy, you know? Underneath that, I have this bass pad, which is the exact same patch as that main riff. However, all I've done is just modified it a little bit so that it's more sustained and it's more drawn out. And that's also got a little bit of sidechain on it too. Once again, it's just pumping. I also have these little ambient throws here. It's just like some random ambient stuff from one of the Slate vocal packs. I just pitched it up. Like I said, like it's all about ambience and space and texture here, so that really sets the main kind of like musical bed for the track. That is really what the whole track's centered around. I do have a couple of little like swishes down here as well that just kind of like breathe into the track as it starts. By having that swish there, what that does is it kind of makes the track feel like it's breathing into itself so that when I go into the verse and I start automating my filters up to kind of bring up the tension, I can sort of lean into that a little bit more because the track immediately starts to feel like it kind of goes down and then comes back up into a verse. What I also have up here at the top is a little vocal element. Now this is part of the verse that I've just filtered out, so it's this vocal here. So I ask you to save me. But I filtered it out in the intro. So you can hear there that it's really tucked far back, but it almost adds this element of like familiarity. Is that a word? I think it is. I'm probably butchering the pronunciation. Somehow English is the only language I speak and I still can't speak it very well. We also have this little intro chop, which is just the chorus melody. I sang it again. I sang it on my SM7B. I usually track on my Warm Audio WA47 Junior, but I just had this set up ready to go and I was like, so don't wanna wake up before it. I saturated it, I sidechained it. And once again, it's adding that familiar element so that when the chorus comes, you've already kind of heard that melody subconsciously. Like you haven't really acknowledged that that is the chorus melody, but it's there. And that's something that I do a lot where like I'm introducing elements throughout the track that are kind of like the key component. So this is what it sounds like. So it is literally just that chorus melody. All that happens on it is there's a little filter that opens up towards the end, which breathes into the verse. For this, we have Manipulator, which is doing my formant shifting and making it sound very like deep in the throat. You're welcome for that. Satin, which is just doing a bunch of saturation, keeping it super gritty, dirty. It's more of like an ambient element opposed to like a lead focal point. Microshift, which is just spreading it out. I've got a de-esser and transient master. De-esser is obviously slamming the S's because I don't want those to affect the reverb on it. Transient master is just taking away any hard, like, virtual mix rack is just doing some more compression here with another 1176. Then I have Pro R, which is just doing all that reverb. We have an EQ, which is filtering out the lows and the highs, because once again, I don't need that top end information. I certainly don't need that low end information there. Otherwise, it's just going to get ultra muddy. Then LFO tool is literally just doing that pumping. It makes the track just feel like it's like jumping. Do you know what I mean? Other than that, that is it for the intro. We do have a couple of little vocal reverb throws here. And the kick does come in on the last half of the intro too, as well as the filter on that main patch opens up a little bit. So going into the verse here, I will talk about the drums first because this is where things start to like really pick up. The synths here are pretty similar. There is some changes, so we'll definitely go through that, but the drums are really what takes this track to this next section. You can hear there that it's like a super simple beat, but it's like a real driving force under the track. So what we have here is, if I zoom in, we've got a main kick. And what I've done there is I've modified the velocity so that when the second kick hits with the snare, it's just a little bit lower. It's a little bit quieter. I don't need that full impact, but I still want that weight there. Because all the impact on the beat where the snare is from the snare, right? I want it to feel like boom, cat, not boom, boom. That snare definitely makes it kind of feel like it swings side to side a little bit more. If it was just a kick, I can show you what that would sound like right now. But like, it would not really have the same impact. I'm seeing stars in my eyes, and I don't know if I remember. Do you get what I mean? If I start adding those snares back in, all of a sudden it really hits. Stars in my eyes, and I don't know if I remember the night. So that's just something cool, you know, just to kind of pay attention to. That kick still needs a little bit of weight on the snare, but not too much. Speaking of the snares, we'll go into those right now because there's a couple of layers here. And one thing that I've done is I've shifted 2 of the snare samples off the beat a little bit. The reason for this is because I want that snare transient to hit super hard, but because that kick still has a little bit of transient attack, even though it's a little bit lower, that kick is probably going to fight it a little bit. So by shifting, especially like those claps, like if you layer a clap with the snare and you shift it off the beat a little bit, it almost feels like the snare's like falling into place. And it gives a little bit more impact and a little bit more bite into that next beat. And because this track really feels like it's driving and it's like pushing itself, that kind of lean in really helps out. So if I solo these drum samples right now, you can kind of hear that attack. So this is made up of 3 samples. It's this snare here, which is shifted off the beat just a little bit. Very clappy, very snappy. We then have this main snap here. Really bright, but you can hear like it's got that really intense transient. And then I've got this super beefy snare, which is doing all the body. It is also worth noting that I've got all of my drums routed to a bus, and then that is going off to like a kind of drum room. It's a super big spacey reverb. Oh, you can hear one of my neighbour's dogs. That's fun. Something that I do a lot in pop is I will add like a final like airy clap to the end of like a phrase. So maybe like every 4 bars, the final beat will have a clap on it that's a little bit more spacey. So I have this air clap here, and you can hear what that does. It just adds a little bit more impact there. And it almost, once again, is all about this thing of like breathing into the next section a little bit. We've also got a hi-hat here. It feels very digital, but like that was kind of the point, is that I really wanted that to be like tick, 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 tick. We also have this little drum fill here. Once again, it's just leading into that next section. That is it for the drums though, so let's talk about the bass here. So there's 2 bass patches playing right now. As you can hear there, once again, sidechained. So what I have here is this sharp bass, which is a very similar patch to that main riff that I had in the intro, which also does play through this, but it's modified. What that does is it creates something a little bit more consistent, and it's all kind of in like the same sonic family, so that everything feels like it's part of a cohesive unit, which to me is super important with this type of thing. I also then have this like more gritty, like stabby bass, which you can hear has a little bit more sub information, and it has a little bit more of that kind of like scoop mids and that kind of brash top end. It's not too aggressive, but it's definitely adding a bit more bite and a bit more weight to the track. So moving on to the synths in the verse here, that main riff from the intro is here. However, what I've done is I've modified that synth patch a little bit so that it has a little bit more attack and it feels almost a little bit more like a key sound opposed to a brass. That's creating that impact and that stab. I'm all about building tension here, so that is like really pushing through. So you can hear, compared to the intro synth, that has a lot more bite to it. Yeah, you getting it? I also have a little reverse here, which is just like a synth that I've bounced out with a bunch of reverb on it. So let's move on to the verse vocals here. So the verse vocals, if I just shrink these down a bit, because there's quite a bit going on here. We have a lead vocal, which is just straight up in the middle with a bunch of like reverb and stuff on it, which I'll talk about.
I'm seeing stars in my eyes, and I don't know if I remember the night.
So the vocal chain on this is autotune, always and forever, my true love. And then Pro Q, which is taking out a bunch of that bottom end. I'm high passing quite a bit of it. I'm taking out a little bit of like 300, 290. I'm taking about almost 4 dB out of that. Scooping out, like 1K, scooping out like 2K, a little bit out of 3K, and I'm doing a tiny little boost on the top just for some air. If I was using this mic on my lead vocal, I would be doing a lot more drastic EQ just to get it sitting right, but my warm audio is like pristine heaven. It is also worth noting that I had an 1176 and an LA2A on my vocal chain going in the UAD console app. Both were doing maybe like 2 or 3 dB gain reduction. Nothing super crazy, but the less I can actually do in the mix, the better. So going into virtual mix track here, once again, I have an 1176 and an LA2A.
I'm seeing stars in my eyes, and I don't know if I remember the night.
So the 1176 is doing most of the work on this. I've got, a pretty fast attack. I mean, even a slow attack on 1176 is pretty quick anyway, but an ultra fast release, and then I'm getting maybe like 5 dB reduction on that. It's clamping down on it pretty aggressively, especially when you consider that I had compression going in as well. The reason for this is because the drums are so punchy, that bass is driving, that key synth is there. There's a lot of reverb. If my vocals aren't super tight on this and super like, beefed up and in your face, they're going to kind of get lost. And I will talk a little bit about vocal layering as well when the production builds up. My neighbor's dog will not shut the fuck up. And I love dogs, don't get me wrong, but like, why does it have to bark at this time of the day? Like, it's noon. What's your problem? And then we have an LA2A. It's just doing a little bit more compression. We're getting like 4 or 5 dB of reduction on it, which once again, I like to squash my vocals, okay? Don't judge me. However, it's a little bit smoother. It's a little bit of a slower attack. It's just kind of like gluing everything together a little bit. Moving on to FGN, this is one of my favorite EQs in the Slate bundle. And I'm just taking like not even a full dB out of like 3.2K. It's just to kind of stop everything getting a little too brash, a little too harsh, a little bit too like piercing almost. And then just down here, I'm taking a dB and a half out of like 120. Don't need it. Over on the custom series EQ, I'm taking a little bit out of 15K as well. They were just a little too bright for my liking. Not even a full dB. Then I have a de-esser, which is just tackling my sibilants. I have a multiband compressor, which is just kind of clamping down on 300 and clamping down on like 2.5. And then I've got 2 final de-essers. One is handling that super bright sibilants, like the really like sizzly sausage sounding horrible things. And then the other de-esser is handling more of like that F, like those more breathy sibilants that aren't so piercing and aggressive, but still can kind of get emphasized. But that mix is only at 35%, so it's really just kind of squishing them a little bit. Moving on to the vocals here, we're sending this off to a vocal widening quite a lot. I noticed that in a lot of the I've noticed in a lot of the Tove Lo tracks that she has like a lot of kind of spatial stuff going on in terms of like spatial widening. Love it. Like it reminds me so much of like 2012 Kesha. So that's just micro shift from Sound Toys, and I'm de-essing it before it goes into that so that my S's aren't like super wide. I feel like so yeah. If I do that, I mean left and right, like. But you got to think I'm a fucking freak. But yeah, de-ess it before it goes into that so that my de-essers aren't really wide. Short reverb, giving a bunch of space. A long reverb, which is really drawing it out. It's also worth noting as well, if you are planning on having a long reverb and a lot of space, make sure your vocals are tight as fuck. These are super tuned. So I had auto-tune on a super slow retune speed going in. Then I tuned them by hand, and then I've got auto-tune on them again, which might seem excessive, and not every vocal will need it. However, for me, I wanted that kind of almost hard tune sound. It's very tuned, but it's like the transitions between notes are still kind of smooth. It's more so that vibrato is like really clamped down. Then I have a quarter delay, and then a slapback delay, and then I have a super bright reverb. And you can see down here on my reverb sends that I am automating the shit out of this throughout the track. Like, it's really washy, really bright, but it's giving all of the swelling and all of the space. I then add doubles here to emphasize certain points. So because this is kind of like a call and response thing, you can hear here that we've got the main part of the vocals mono, and then I add the doubles here to emphasize certain parts.
I'm seeing stars in my eyes, and I don't know if I remember the night. I'm waiting on a miracle, so I ask you to save me.
Which is ultimately just playing into that call and response effect, and it's also beefing it up. It's really just emphasizing that point. I do also have some harmonies down here as well.
I ask you to save me.
Don't think my laptop likes that, but hey. So if I play that all together.
Oh, so I ask you to save me.
So you can hear it's super tucked back, but it just gives a bit of lift here. It's a super simple vocal chain. It's pretty much the same as the lead. I probably just de-essed it a little harder. I won't go too into it. But then I have some vocal throws and stuff down here. If you want a separate video on spatial effects, I can totally do that. But I'm not going to get too into the vocal throws right now. So for the second part of the verse, this is where I want to start building up a little bit. So I add in this low octave here, which is pitched down with auto-tune and then saturated using satin. Which is really just adding weight to that vocal.
Don't wanna lose you in the rest of the crowd.
And then because this line is kind of repeated, it's like tonight it's just me and you, what I want to do is, because it's a similar melody to the first part of the verse, I wanted to add a lift here so that when the pre-chorus comes, falls back into it. Do you get what I mean? I recorded this falsetto vocal, and I'm going to warn you right now, it's tuned really hard. It sounds terrible in solo, but because it's not really a lead element, I have no issue burying this under because it's just providing air. That's all it's doing. It's providing air and like lift to the vocal. You can hear that my mouth is dry, but if I play that together, all of a sudden it just has this little bit more air to it and this more like lift.
'Cause tonight it's only me and you, so I ask you to save me. Feels like
So quickly as well, what I do have is I have this ambient synth right here. As it breathes into the pre-chorus, I have this other little granular synth pad that I have. This is going to be in a new sample pack that's coming. It's Hyperpop 3. It's the last one of Hyperpop. I'm telling you right now, I'm not doing another Hyperpop pack. This will be the last installment and it will be coming out towards the end of the year. But just letting you know. So this is kind of what I've been doing throughout, you know, in between production for clients, remixing, vocal editing, all the stuff that I do. I'm also working on Hyperpop 3. So this is something that I've just been messing around with, and it worked so well in this. It just adds, once again, it's almost like a pad element. So you can hear that builds through the track.
it's only me and you, so I ask you to save me. Feels like static.
Once again, we've got like general, you know, rises and down hits that I won't get into too much, but then the pre-chorus is kind of where this starts to change. So we start introducing some more keys and some more synths, and these are all filtered out on my synth bus. So the first thing we have is we have that bass pad from the intro, that's back in there, and then we have this Bones keys here, which is from my Serum Pack Nostalgia. If you want to check out any of the Ash Taylor packs, please do. I will leave the link down below in the description. It'll be the first link. And if you want to work together, that'll be the second link. Boom. Don't tell you I don't make it easy. We then have these saw chords here, which are really like impactful. Like, they've got a lot of like stab. That's also from Nostalgia. We then have these high chords, which is the Aria Shimmer preset from Anna 2, and then we have this ARP, which is from Arturia in Analog Lab 5, I think. Very spacey, very 80s, very synth-wavy, very into it. So all the drums drop out here. The only thing that we have is that kind of like vocal reverby throw thing, and then we have one lead vocal and then a vocoder. So if I play you this vocal, it's the same chain as the lead from the verse.
Feels like static in the air, but I'm alive.
But you can hear that bright reverb that I was talking about earlier is like really swelling here. And then going down, we have a vocoder, which is Isotope's vocal synth. I'm going to be honest, vocal synth isn't my favorite vocoder, but it just kind of worked for this. I really want to try Harmony Engine soon. But that is literally it for the pre-chorus. Everything drops out, and it's just like this kind of like euphoric, spacey moment where like, I almost want it to feel like you were like in a club, like having like an out-of-body experience, which might be a bit drastic and a bit dramatic, but that's kind of the way that I envisioned this track going. So if we listen to that transition between the verse and the pre, this is what it sounds like.
'Cause tonight it's only me and you, so I ask you to save me. Feels like static in the air, but I'm alive. For tonight it's you and me, and that's alright. So won't you pull me?
So let's get into that chorus. Obviously, we have all the risers going into it, and we have a big drum fill here. It's the same drum fill as the verse. All I've done is I've added this little acoustic fill on top. It is time stretched just a little bit, so you can hear a little bit of that like kind of glitchy artifact, but it blends in perfectly fine. The drums do beef up here a little bit, so we do have, you know, all the kicks, all the snares. Then what we have is we have this cymbal transition, we have a hi-hat loop and a tambourine. So if I play these in solo, you can definitely hear the difference between the verse and the chorus. So this is the verse drums. And then this is the chorus drums. Another cool thing here is that I wanted to really emphasize that final bar. So what I did is I layered on this crash and just shortened the sample and then pitched it up so it almost feels like a splash. And for whatever reason, it just makes you want to punch the air. Like, it's just like bam, 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 bam. I don't know what it is. It's almost like, yeah, it's kind of housey, but it just makes you want to like fucking... And it's tucked really far back, but if I play that within the context of everything, it just gives it so much more impact. For the chorus, the bass is the same. I think the only thing that's different is that I add in a little bass patch from Vital. I think that's from the new Pop Music pack. It's just got a little bit more sub-information. It's a little bit more boomy. The synths here, everything from the pre-chorus plays. However, what I've done is on my synth bus, I've opened up a filter, and it's the kilohertz filter, and it just introduces all that top end and all of that sparkle. So I won't go into the synths exactly, but what I will do is I will show you the new additions. So what I have here is I have this True Saw patch, which I made in Serum. It's super bright and super like aggressive, but what it does is it fills in all that space between those chord stabs and just gives a little bit more high-end information so that it feels more energetic. Because the drum high-end info is like really rhythmic because it's like ba 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 ba. I wanted something that was a little bit more sustained but still had some of that top-end information so that it felt super like lifted. I use the word lifted all the time. Maybe it's a sign that I'm going to get a facelift. I also have these vintage swells here, which are also from Arturia. They are the classic Road preset from Analog Lab 5, which I think is actually just the standard preset in their 106. I then have this detuned patch, which is a brass pad from Pop Music's Poptopia pack. Shout out to Pop Music. I also have this 80s alternate melody type thing, which is from maybe one of my packs. No, it's not. It's the lead from Poptopia as well, and it is called Miami Nights. It sounds like shit in solo, but in the context of the mix, it really just kind of adds movement. If I solo all those synths, you can kind of hear it. We also have all of those reverb effects, like those little synth things that we talked about earlier. They go into the second half of the chorus. Also leading into that second half of the chorus, we have some strings, which really does give it that disco vibe. And you can hear it at this transitional section between the first half and the second half of the chorus. And then moving on to the vocals here, we start really layering stuff up. I mean, you can see here that I've got a lot going on. So I have the lead, which is pretty much the same chain. I've got 2 doubles, which once again is the same chain. I think what I've done on these is I format shifted them so they're not as bright. What I do add in the second half is these low octaves. Now I'm going to warn you, these sound like shit.
Tell me all your secrets. Promise, baby, you know that I'll...
There's a lot of bleed from my headphones, but they're tucked so far back in there, it's really not going to make that much of a difference. It's just adding more body and weight and a little bit more of like a natural, despite how tuned they are, effect.
Tell me all your secrets. Promise, baby, you know that I'll keep it. Don't let the light fade from my eyes.
And straight on top of that as well, we have a falsetto section.
Tell me all your secrets. Promise, baby, you know that
I've got auto-tune on that, doing a little bit of format shifting. It's just kind of making it a little bit less nasally and a little bit darker, despite how nasally it sounds. Once again, that is purely there for air and energy, opposed to like a lead element. You're not going to listen to this and think, oh, falsetto vocal. You're going to think, oh, energy change. I'm all about harnessing the power of like technology and like auto-tune and whatever it is to change an emotional feel, or to heighten it, opposed to like, you know, like you don't have to be 100% natural with your vocal, especially in this. This is not a Lewis Capaldi song. It's not an Adele song. If you're making this type of thing at home and like you're like, shit, like how do I make more energy? Process the shit out of your vocals. Trust me, like it will transform the way the track feels. And it doesn't sound like it's that processed. Like, don't get me wrong, it sounds tuned. It sounds very, you know, polished, for lack of a better word. However, I don't think that it sounds like, oh my God, it's T-Pain. It's more like, oh my God, there's a lot of energy. We also have that same vocoder from earlier, and then we have this low vocal as well. Same thing that we did earlier in the verse, however, it's pitched down with autotune, saturated even more, and then there's a little bit of microshift and a little bit of bit crushing on it, which gives it that super, super crunchy effect. So on the phrases, don't let me die tonight, we have a little pitched up vocal as well. Which is the exact same thing as that low octave that's really distorted. However, what it is it's just pitched up and filtered a little bit. So let's play this track in full now, up to where I'm at, and we'll take a listen.
I'm seeing stars in my eyes. I don't know if I remember the night. I'm waiting on a miracle, so I ask you to save me. Some more liquor, pour it down. Don't wanna lose you and the rest of the crowd, 'cause tonight it's only me and you, so I ask you to save me. Feels like static in the air, but I'm alive. For tonight it's you and me, and that's alright. So won't you pull me closer? Don't wanna wake up before it's over. See kaleidoscopes in the sky, and don't let me die tonight. And tell me all your secrets. Promise, baby, you know that I'll keep it. Don't let the light fade from my eyes, and don't let me die tonight.
So yeah, that is how you make a synth-pop song like Ava Max, some of the new Ellie Goulding stuff, a little bit of the Tove Lo stuff. So yeah, a couple of things that are worth noting is that you need to kind of keep the synth a little bit more on the synthwavy, 80s, vintagey side. Not always, but you know, if you're kind of going for this specific sound, definitely. Tight, punchy drums, and yeah, just fuck around and just make something cool. Like, that's my method with it anyways. Like, nowadays, I spent when I started producing like for other artists, I spent so long like trying to do what was right. And like, what was, oh my God, what would a professional say about me? Oh my God, blah, whatever. Fuck off. Like, just make cool shit. Like, the average person is not going to give a fuck what compressor you've used, or what EQ you've used, or how you've achieved something, or how tuned your vocal is, or whatever it is. People that are listening to music are listening to music because they want to listen to music. They're not listening to go, oh my God, kick drum, no one gives a fuck. Make cool music, make cool shit. And that is like pretty much just like my life motto. Anyway, I'm going to go. I'm going to love you and leave you. Don't forget to check out ashtothemusic.com for all of your presets and samples. There's loads over there. And also, if you are interested in working together, then the second link in the description is my contact form on my website. Fill it out, tell me all the info about your project, and I'll be back in touch. Anyway, I really appreciate you watching, and I will see you on the next one. Bye!